With me is Agnes Trzak. She's a feminist animal rights activist and a PhD student in communications. And she teaches international relations. And she will explain now what she's talking about.
Hi, thank you very much. Thank you, and thank you all for coming. I know it's late, and yeah, we all have things to do, but it's great that you're all here, and thank you very much for organizing this. This has been already a really great experience for myself, and it's great to be here with all of you. And yeah, today I will talk about phallologocentrism. I'll explain in a second. I'll take the word apart and then explain a bit more what I mean by it. But generally, I want to talk about phallologocentrism as the system that creates privilege and oppression. I will give you first an impression of why I want to talk about this, why I think it's important. And there are two reasons. The first one is that I've noticed that lots of other kind of social justice activists don't make the connection to anti-speciesism. They don't make the connection like we like to say. And I think if we understand phallologocentrism, then we can perhaps see how to speak to these activists and how to guide them towards anti-speciesism, towards veganism. And the second reason is that I want to look into our own movement. I want to look at why it is important for us to connect animal liberation with other liberation movements that focus on human rights. So why is it important for us to explicitly be anti-fascist, anti-sexist, anti-ableist, anti-ageist, and the list continues. I will go into more depth during the presentation. Okay, so let's turn to this really loaded word. I'll take it apart and then we'll look more into it. So first of all, you can see I kind of chose different colors to use the different the word stem, and I'll designate kind of the meaning to each of these parts of the word. But in general, phallologocentrism perhaps this is perhaps the most straightforward explanation that I could give, which Judith Butler termed as the masculinist signifying economy. So that basically means that if we speak or if we act phallogocentrically, we act in a masculinist way. We interact with each other through this kind of dominant, hegemonic system of interaction. So also in my title for this presentation, I talk about language, and I would like to say that when I say language of patriarchy, if I call phallologocentrism the language of patriarchy, I don't just mean language as the written word or the spoken word or the letters. I mean all kind of symbols, all interaction, all communication that's between us, between people and objects, between people and animals, between everything that's there. So even if you, basically what I'm trying to say is that if you don't, even if you don't try to communicate something, you're already signifying something. So there's always a meaning. So that I can identify you, I can pin you down, I can categorize you, I can, you're always expressing something, or I am always perceiving something when we are in this phallogocentric system. So it's a system of classification. Now, if we look at the different words that I kind of highlighted, so obviously the word stem comes from the phallic, from the phallus, and implies this kind of masculine and male dominance. It also implies the potent, that which is able, right? So here's the connection to ableism again. We are looking for this really stereotypical male who's strong, who's tough, this kind of masculine cliche maybe. And this bit is very important because I think that the phallic implies that which is visible. If you really bluntly take it and compare it to the reproductive organs of a man and a woman, then you have the phallic will always be the visible one, the one that's there, that's out there. It's kind of, you can see it. You don't have to look for it. You don't have to search for it. And then the second bit, so we are at the logical phallologos. And the logical implies, the reasonable, this kind of rational system of classifying things that I mentioned earlier. It's immediately opposed, or in contrast to the emotional, to the intuitive. And I'm sure you get all these kind of stereotypical images in your head when I say these words. So we all, we are taught to associate the kind of strong and potent and able with the man, and while the rational especially, while the emotional and intuitive kind of is more female, feminine, is perceived as that. And this kind of this logical systematic categorization of everything implies a hierarchy. It implies a hierarchy of not only the male and the female, but also the human and the animal, nature, culture, and it goes on. We have good and bad, right and wrong, all these kind of systems of classification that we all use to communicate to each other, because that's how we understand what we are saying. And the last bit then is the centristic, so phallologocentrism. And here I just kind of put down that the phallologos is in the center of attention. It's the dominant system of signification. It's the normal system of signification. It's so normal maybe that it's almost invisible. We don't realize that we are in it, and that it's all encompassing. And the ism in phallologocentrism just implies an ideology. So it's a political action to speak phallologocentrically, to interact phallologocentrically. Okay, so this is why I said that it's the basis of our political and social economy as well. Then I would like to continue to talk about privilege. We've already heard a lot about it from Lisa Camera, for example, who's also here. And I would like to go into, I'll show you a chart actually. This is from Catherine Morgan, and she kind of took all these binaries that we all communicate through, and put them into such a chart. So everything you see, I don't know if it's visible at the back, but everything that you see above the kind of black bar here is that which is privileged. Everything that you see below is that which is oppressed, or that which is in direct resistance to that which is privileged. And we have, for example, the male and masculine, or straight female and feminine at the top. And it goes to the gender deviant as the oppressed party there. I don't know what else is up there. For example, highly literate and educated people will be better off than those who don't have the possibility to be educated, to learn how to read, to learn how to speak. The system basically shows you how much power is given to you. If you are, it's very kind of simplistic to say that you can just tick off whichever ones apply to you. If you're lesbian, gay, or bisexual, or transgender, you can say that you're really unprivileged. But in opposition to someone who is heterosexual or cisgendered. Yeah, I think this is quite clear, but again, we heard a presentation earlier, I don't know if many of you were there, where we heard about feminists who don't make the connection to speciesism, and and here again I had to add the kind of human and the animal and plant opposition or binary to this chart. So if we think about privilege a bit more, we have to ask ourselves, where does it come from? So I was trying to make it as brief as possible and concise as possible. So basically, if you have privilege, if you're white, male, educated, property owning, you will be able to articulate, you'll be able to signify meaning, you'll be able to produce that meaning that you want to signify. Well, at least you are perceived to. And on the other side, you are also able to comprehend the meaning that is kind of directed towards you, the words, sentences, the kind of interactions that you observe. You are able to comprehend them, to decipher them, to understand them. And this basically means that you are able to represent and to be represented. So there is someone who speaks like you, who understands you, who sees you, who perceives you. And then a bit lower here, I wrote down that to have privilege means to master the proper way of assembling a preset array of symbols. So there is, we have to remember this, that everything that we say is already, it's already pre-made for us, basically. We call this a chair, and then everybody knows what I mean. If I call this a table, you'll know that I'm talking about the table, right? Because it's already a signifier that's already in place, and I just have to use it to communicate to you what I want to say. And so the more able you are to do this, to use these signifiers, the more knowledge you have. You are seen to have more knowledge. You are seen to have more authority. You are given this authority. You are given this power by this phallogocentric society, because you are able to master the kind of proper way of understanding and creating meaning. So I want to talk about rights really quickly before I go to the slide on oppression. And I think this is important because if we talk about privilege, we need to talk about rights, because if you are privileged, you have rights, or your rights are more valued than the rights that others have, which on paper might be the same, but your rights kind of are hierarchically set higher than of those who are oppressed. So to have rights is to be granted privilege, and if you're fighting for rights, like for example with what's called gay marriage, it's being elevated from the status of not having the right to get married to having the right to get married like a heterosexual couple would have. And this is what we mean by equality, right? To have the freedom to do these things. And if we think about it a bit more, we also notice that whenever we fight for rights, we also fight for the right to be the same as those privileged people that we've talked about before. So we are trying to be more like them. And this also implies that we are losing our difference. We're kind of leaving behind what made us ourselves when we become elevated, if that makes sense. So this is kind of what otherness implies, that we are different, we are being the other. So I'll explain a bit more what I mean by the other now when I speak about oppression. So the privileged produces an other. The privilege cannot exist without an other. This is basically because phallogocentrism is a system of relations. We are always in relation to each other. We just know what a table is because we know what a chair is, for example. So if I say, can you pass me the bottle of water, you will know that I'm not asking for the chair, if that makes sense. So things are always in relation. We categorize them, and by that we know what we are saying to each other. And in the same way, the privileged can only be privileged if there is someone to oppress. So if there's someone who's kind of lower, who's worse, who's, just, hierarchically less valued and less legitimate than the privileged. And another point that is important is that the other, and if we talk about the animal other especially, is not enunciating. It's not using a language that we understand at least, but this means that we cannot hear them, we cannot perceive them, we cannot interact with them. They are just imperceptible to us. And so this is why the privileged uses the other as a currency. So it's an object of exchange. It's something that we just use as a commodity. So it's a commodified object, and it's only an object because we, for example, with animal activism, this becomes very clear. We cannot ask an animal for their consent, right? To do to them whatever we please to do, or if we want to liberate them, we cannot ask them for their consent. And I'm obviously not saying we shouldn't liberate animals, but you see the conundrum that is coming up here. And so this can be applied to any other kind of objectified or commodified other. And this point here that the privileged objectifies and consumes the other, I think I would like to draw on the consumption of the other a bit more, because you can, in animal activism, I think it's quite, from an anti-species point of view, it's quite obvious for all of us that we don't want to take an animal and consume them. We don't want to literally eat them and make them part of us, right? This is what we do when we consume another. The last point, we literally eat the animal, and they only exist as whatever is in our digestive system. They don't exist as the person that they used to be before. They don't exist as their own intrinsic self anymore. Or in fact, for us, they have never existed as their own person, if we speak from a phallologocentric point of view. And now the question arises, what do we do, what can we do to not participate in this phallogocentric system, even if we are already fighting for like the ultimate other, the animal as the ultimate other, as the ultimate oppressed, or even nature or trees. We heard a really amazing speech about trees earlier, how we need to fight for tree rights, and these are the kind of ultimate others that can never ever speak for themselves. They cannot represent themselves like all humans do because we have human privilege. And now the question is, what can we do? So in this instance, I turn to intersectionality. Let me just say a few words about what I mean by this. So intersectionality is when we recognize that there is an interconnectedness between all others, so all those who are not on the top half of that circle that I showed at the beginning. So all those who have been at some point oppressed, who had to join the resistance against phallologocentrism. I think it's also important to say that by using a kind of intersectional politics, we don't homogenize all oppressed people, all oppressed animals. We only we compare the system that oppresses them. We don't say that the suffering of an animal is the same as the suffering of a woman. We can't make this comparison. We can only speak about the system, which is this phallogocentric system that oppresses all of us, including that white subject, I guess, white male subject. Then we have to ask ourselves, how can we use intersectional politics? How can we practice them? So we have to prohibit the objectification and consumption of all others. We have to, we have to speak out, and we have to say, don't. What we do, don't consume animals. Don't be racist. Don't be ageist. All these kind of classifications. And I think what is important, this came out of the point that I made earlier, that if we fight for rights, we kind of fight for this equality, and we perhaps betray a bit of ourselves. And this is if we fight for equality. So I would kind of like to propose that we should fight for justice, which I think all of us do, but it's for me it was a very useful tool to explicitly make this distinction. So if we fight for justice, we fight for liberation. And just to quickly clarify what liberation means. So it implies a kind of freedom from, first of all, being patronized. And now being patronized implies some sort of kindness, but like from a superior position. Like we do perhaps with a child, or I don't know, with elderly or disabled people who we think, we know what's good for you. We will teach you, we'll show you what you can do. And so if we want to fight for justice, we need to liberate, and we need to give these oppressed groups some dignity. We also need to not homogenize. For example, with the animals again, this is a very good example because it's the animals. It's not a particular individual. Like we have one in the audience, so it's there's a difference again of recognizing each animal in themselves, each woman in themselves, each person of color in themselves. It's not every person of color will go through the same systems of oppression as the other, and I think this is really important because this is already one step to this consumption of. It's much easier to classify a whole group of things, a whole group of animals, a whole group of plants, for example, and this makes it much more impersonal. And I think the last 3 points kind of are very obvious. So if we talk about using animals, using labor, using slaves, any sort of form of using someone else is already always abuse, and it's interconnected with being violated. So if we have an animal who's being forcefully impregnated, we violate her body, we violate her own private space, we violate her soul even, and this is all coming down to consent again. We cannot get consent from these others that are all other than ourselves. And the last point is just that obviously the liberation implies the freedom from being owned, from being someone's property, from being someone's just currency, from this kind of commodified object. So consent is the key, really. And if we're talking about animal rights, we want to talk about abolition. So we really want to talk about complete freedom from any kind of relation to humans. And obviously this is at the moment, no, this is not the stage we are at. But I think this should be our goal, and this should also include, companion animals and wildlife and all these kind of forms that are perhaps not as oppressed as an animal in a factory farm. And yeah, so this is this kind of idea of going away from the other, of not imposing any kind of meaning on the other. We want to leave everyone as an in of themselves. We want to leave them as they are, and especially as humans with human privilege, we have no right of classifying any other species and any other really. Just as a last remark, I want to maybe a bit more practically now talk about what we can do in animal liberation if we want to go away from this phallologos that just follows us and that we all grew up in, that we are all part of. We are always somewhere on the spectrum of the privileged, but also somewhere on the spectrum of the oppressed. And I think the main argument that you can give people why it's important to be an intersectional movement, why it's important to be inclusive of minorities and to provide a safe space for them. So this also implies to not be inclusive of those who violate the safe space of those who are already oppressed. So the main argument for this is that we are a movement of humans. The animals cannot, they are not going to start a revolution, they are not going to liberate themselves. We need to be there for them. And this is also a very unique, a unique movement of social justice. No other kind of human movement has this, where you literally have to speak for the other. So just practically, we have to create these safe spaces for all of us. We have to not allow these kind of hate crimes. We have to speak out if someone is using sexist language, if someone is using ableist language. We have to stand up. And this group is very very welcoming, very very warm, and I don't know how it is when you go back to your kind of activist groups, but there is a lot of conflict. I've read internationally. I've read a lot of conflict arising. I've read about it arising from especially about fascist infiltration of the movement. And I think it's really important to make a stand and say it's not okay. You're not welcome. You cannot. You cannot violate our safe space, because we are a movement of humans, and we need to focus on creating this good energy that we can then productively apply to liberate the animals. So really, I know it's easy to say, speak out, do this, do that, but it takes a lot of. You have to be very brave, I think, to speak out for someone who's being violated, who's being oppressed. But I think if one of us tries, and then someone else will see that you have done it, and this way, this solidarity will grow all the time, and I think that's something very beautiful. So that's basically all I wanted to say to that. So now I hope you all know what Phallologocentrism is, and if you have any more questions about it, I listed a bit of literature that helped me on the way to understanding this concept a bit better. Thank you.
Thank you for the lecture. It's immensely interesting, and you talked about freedom from being patronized, and I would like to ask how that applies to animals. I mean, you also said that we sometimes have to make decisions for them when they are dependent on us? And where's this line between this patronizing that shouldn't happen in the case of like ideal abolition, and actually, well, doing something for animals? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a question that I ask myself on a daily basis. That's a question I ask myself when I go on a walk with my dog. When this is nothing I can answer, really straightforward. But I think it's, again, I'm not prescribing anything because I don't want to say that my kind of moral compass should be the moral compass of everyone in here or of everyone in the world, except when it comes to not eating animals. So that's a different topic. But this kind of it's a very nuanced topic. I can't answer it and it will be different in every case of every animal, of every human being. Of course, I'm not gonna, if I see a starving dog on the street, it will trigger some sort of emotion in me, and I'm not going to say, "Oh, I have this theory that I shouldn't, I shouldn't intervene because relations to humans are bad." Of course, this is not what I'm saying, but in an ideal kind of utopian way, this is what we should keep in the back of our minds. But I think on a daily basis, we need to make these decisions for ourselves. And like I said, if you are in a group, if it's 2 people, if it's 3 people, tell them if they crossed the line. If you feel they crossed the line, tell them that they did. If it's about patronizing, if it's about even harsher forms of violation, just open the dialogue, because very often, like in this circle of activists especially, we are all very welcoming, and everyone is here to learn. So I think this is the ideal environment for recognizing these kind of moral dilemmas that we have, but also for discussing them and for seeing and how far we can apply whatever has been said in our daily lives. So there's no like prescription, or I don't have an answer. I just decide, I guess, from case to case.
In the perfect world, you say like animals don't have any connections to humans, and like connections between humans themselves, it's bad, like we have racism and stuff like that. So I'm actually wondering if you're saying in the perfect world humans don't really have use, or I was just
so that's a good question. Sorry.
Okay, if use in the world as humans,
As in having like a purpose, or this is really profound. I think this is a very profound recognition. Sorry, what were you saying? Did you think out loud? I think behind.
It was just a question of, can we possibly have a purpose without using anyone? That's a wonderful question.
Yeah. Can we have a purpose of living without using anyone else? I'll leave that up for an open question, because I think this is the question that I'm asking as well.
That was an excellent presentation. Thank you very much. But you made me stop and think at one point, and people have been picking up on this, and that was the sentence you wrote: abolition equals freedom from any relations to humans. And that made me really stop and pause, but I do know that at times when I've talked to people and been asked questions about animal rights, I will say something like, well, it means that they're able to live their lives without our interference, which I think, as I've been sitting at the back, that's really kind of what you're saying here. But then when I think about it, and I think about how interrelated we all are, that it's very hard to say freedom from any relations to humans, because inevitably no relation is a relation. So, so I guess what I'm leading up to say to you is, I want you to keep thinking about this, and and wordsmith this phrase, because it's right, but it's not quite right. Because I think that we're talking about not the quantity of relations, we're talking about the quality of the relations. And I think that there should be relations between and among humans and non-humans. It's more a question about what are those relations rather than simply no relations whatsoever. And in saying this, I'm not making any criticism of you and your work. I add it to you for you to think about and reject later maybe, or digest in some way.
I can kind of return a question to that, because I think that's actually really, that is what I'm saying, but you're right that any relation to humans is or no relation to humans is again a relation, but this is in the phallologocentric system, because we have a system of representation of relation where something can only exist if something else exists. And if we talk about a qualitative relation to animals, to anyone, then how, and especially with animals, how can we decide whether it's a good one or a bad relationship? How, like, where do we draw the line? Again, this is the question that we have to ask ourselves every day. And yeah, so.
But can I just quickly come back? But I hear you and I accept what you're saying, but the way in which you're presenting it here, I read that as that slide as saying abolition equals freedom from any relation to humans, so that in the ideal would be freedom from any relation to humans.
Yes.
And I have trouble with that.
I have trouble with that as well.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do.
Of course. And,
well, we look forward to you coming back next year with the answer.
I'm not sure if there is an answer to this. Not in this state that we are in at the moment. It's very hard to imagine what can come afterwards, because what we are doing right now is already imagining what comes after the state that we have now. But what's going to come after that is another question.
Because words are not required for that, then perhaps we can have just freedom from non-consensual, from abusive, from what have you have said, those types of relations.
Absolutely. I don't know if everyone heard at the back, but you made the point that perhaps it would be worth to thinking about abolition as the freedom from any non-consensual relation to animals. And this is what we are practicing right now. I hope, anyway, that all of us are practicing this at home as far as we can in this society. But I think. I still want to be adamant about this, though, as a really, really final kind of step, because we need to keep it in mind. There's no way that 7 billion people in the world will never have a relationship with animals unless we kill all animals first, which we are on the way of doing. But the other option then is to make the human extinct, which is. We should not homogenize suffering, and we shouldn't compare suffering, but rather the system that imposes that suffering upon different subjects. Thank you very much.